As the 7th annual Kombinatas festival fast approaching, we are revisiting some of the most compelling events from the last year's main stage. Today, Tarun Gidwani will talk about the New World Disorder, the new era of neoliberalism.
Hi, thank you so much for showing up. Some of you hungover, I'm sure. I'm Tarun, I'm based in London. I'm a PhD student. I grew up in India where I was involved in the Communist Party, Marxist-Leninist, and I'm sort of still engaged in connections with struggles in India. My PhD researches ethical issues in international trade, believe it or not, especially tariffs. So it's been quite a wild, dramatic few months for me since Trump's election and his tariff wars and so on. I'm going to be talking a little bit about tariffs, but essentially connecting it to a broader theme about neoliberalism. It seems that we have now entered a new phase, but it also seems that many things are still the same. That's why the title is actually somewhat misleading. It seems like there is a new world order, but it also seems like there isn't, and a lot of it is just old stuff. And I'm going to sort of lay out what's new, what's old, using different examples. Tariffs in the beginning. Sorry if that part is boring. And then moving on to climate politics and so on and so forth. But here's what I'm going to argue, or here's what I'm going to try and argue, is that among people, there is no longer a willingness to tolerate what for the last 30 years was called neoliberalism. And by neoliberalism, I mean unfettered market domination over social life. There is, you'd have to be blind to not see deep anger and resentment among different regions, different classes of people against neoliberalism. It's sort of, the anger comes out in different ways, sometimes to right-wing populism, sometimes to different other ways. But there is growing discontent and a growing refusal to accept neoliberalism. Yet, neoliberalism seems to linger, it seems to remain. It still seems to be the case, despite growing anger, despite... now you have a situation where the right is talking about working class lives, protecting domestic production from free trade and so on. So you do have some recognition that there is deepening, growing resentment against neoliberalism, but it seems that nothing fundamentally changes. And I'm going to basically present what I think is evidence for this, which is that it is a new world order, but it is largely the same old order, through talking about tariffs, through talking a little bit about what is happening in the EU, and then also talking about what's happening in the left, specifically with regards to climate change and climate politics. So at any point, if any of what I say doesn't make sense, especially if I'm talking anything to do with economic theory or anything technical, just please interrupt and ask me, because I would rather it be a more fruitful and constructive discussion than just me bullshitting. So I will start first with tariffs. It seems that one big reason for Trump's win in the US election is the effect of globalization. And you have, I think, now very, very clear data, even county by county in the US, showing loss of manufacturing jobs. And sometimes in the media there is a tendency to sort of show this as only white working class jobs. It's simply not true. There have been severe job losses. Let's say, for instance, in the education sector, close to 250,000 black teachers losing jobs in the last 8 years. And you can see it literally county by county. I think the evidence is pretty striking that the shift to Trump is, if not directly causally related to this, but there is a significant contribution of this working class discontent against globalization. And Trump's pivot to tariff, you cannot understand that without locating it as a response to this discontent. What he's telling his base is that he's going to bring back manufacturing jobs by restricting competition from outside, specifically China, and therefore reviving domestic production, bringing back working class jobs, and making life beautiful again. Except that it seems to be just talk. And it seems to be just talk because tariffs by themselves don't lead to reindustrialization, don't lead to and this is very important in the left for us to grasp, because among many countries there is this return to protectionism, and there is this return to some kind of national sovereignty over economic activity, which seems like a good thing. But what we as left should know is that by themselves they mean nothing. In fact, by themselves they can, if anything, impose a cost on workers by increasing prices of domestic goods, or just handing out free cash to domestic firms that no longer have to compete with international firms. So by themselves, they don't lead to job creation. What you need is tariffs plus an industrial strategy. And by industrial strategy, I mean you need state capacity that is able to discipline firms, that is able to tell firms that where to reinvest, what kind of jobs to create, what kind of wages to give workers. And there is no way to have a meaningful industrial strategy that can revive manufacturing jobs in the US or in the EU, or any jobs, without disciplining corporations. Tariffs by themselves don't discipline corporations. They, in fact, actually spoil them. So what a good left strategy would do is some kind of tariff plus control over firms. And there's no way to control over firms without working class organizing, without genuinely empowering workers within those firms. So a lot of, therefore, what is happening at the level of tariff war seems to genuinely be what in the financial press people are now calling insane washing, where it's just gibberish, actually. Like, for instance, the US imposing 150% or 125%, I mean, now they sort of went back on it, on China. It's just impossible. It doesn't make any sense. And the same with EU, for instance. Just a few weeks back, the EU accepted a 15% tariff on its goods to the US, and it promised to invest 600 billion, I think, in US dollars in US, and buy 700 billion worth American fossil fuel energy. Brussels made this agreement with Trump recently. And both the right and the left seem to sort of like really buy into this insane washing. I was reading some commentary about this in the different press, and they seem to sort of, some opinion columnists call this Europe's summer of humiliation. There was a socialist magazine that said there are only two states in Europe, small states and small states that haven't yet realized they're small. Some called it really cunning and really an efficient way to sort of maneuver the new global order. Some called it really embarrassing, calling it a summer of shame, and so on and so forth. The truth is the deal just doesn't make sense. The EU has no means of investing 600 billion in anywhere because Brussels don't make investment decisions. States do and corporations do. The EU is not China. It doesn't have the same kind of international corporate governance that it can make decisions. So there is a lot of this insane washing, that's just this gobbledygook that's going on without any underlying logic. But there is a logic. And the logic is that elite, both right and center, political parties across the Atlantic West and also in the global South are signaling to the base that we are going to bring back some kind of jobs, we are going to bring back some kind of control over our economic life, we are going to resist globalization. So it is appealing to genuine discontent, but what it ends up doing is more of the same thing. It ends up doing just austerity. I mean, when Trump was asked, what if some of these tariffs are going to increase prices of toys and so on, his reply was, our baby dolls don't need to buy more Barbies. And discounting the misogyny of it, it's just austerity from another door. You know? So it's sort of saying that it is responding to working class discontent, to the needs of the poor, to joblessness, to precarity, but it's simply austerity from the back door. And it's, I think, I mean, I'm going to now talk a little bit about Europe, but of course, I used to live in Estonia for 8 years before I moved to where I now live in London. So I think I have some cursory understanding of the economic situation in Estonia and maybe, like by extension, some parts of the Baltics, but not really. So I'm going to offer some kind of observations, but challenge me on that in the Q&A or even before. But it's more of a fodder for us to think. Now, when I first moved to Estonia, which was in 2014, which was, I'm sure some of you remember, it was the rise of the so-called refugee crisis. There was this sudden rise of the far right. I remember I was in Tartu because I was studying there, and there were these far right demonstrations, people holding flames up and so on. And there was a lot of confusion actually among the liberal elite and among the left about where this is coming from. And it was also sort of all pinned on the usual culprits, xenophobia, racism, which is obviously true. But one thing that was strikingly absent from the left discourse and also the reportage of even the liberal and the mainstream media was just the enormous, heartbreaking, I mean, I don't even have words for it, discontent in rural and suburban Baltics. I remember visiting my partner who was living in this small town in south of Estonia, and I would maybe visit every 2 or 3 months. Each month, almost, something was shutting down. A school was shutting down, the local gym was shutting down, stores. I was talking about this to other people that I met also here from Estonia. Jobs completely decimated. museums shutting down, cultural workers just having no way except to either to fall into very, very low-end jobs or move to the city or completely migrate out of Estonia. It was just, just gigantic discontent, which was glaring. And just having done politics in a place like India, you just can't have that discontent and not have a turn towards right wing. It's just not going to happen. So that was one glaring thing that I observed in rural Estonia. But the other thing was the complete absence of the left in rural and semi-urban towns. They just don't exist. There were no party offices in these villages, not even of the Social Democratic Party. There were only a few right-wing and far-right parties. And they were doing what the left used to be really good at doing, identifying local community leaders, identifying issues to do with joblessness, to do with sometimes agrarian distress, but also just the loss of community infrastructure, the loss of any meaningful social life and social cohesion. The right was responding to that. Of course, without any meaningful alternatives or solutions. I mean, their main response was to blame it on immigration and to sort of organize this anger around xenophobic lines. But the anger was not misplaced. And studies after studies, I forgot I had slides. Studies after studies demonstrate this. A 1% reduction in regional public funding in Europe leads to a 3% increase in voting rights for far rights. And there is a new study that just came out last year, actually, which I would be happy to share if you want to check it out. Can you see the slides on there? Basically, it links right-wing voting to financial and work-related insecurity. So it asks questions like, do you have enough money to do dental work? Do you have enough money to repair your goods? Do you have enough money to heat your fucking home? Do you have enough money to repair if your washing machine is broken down? And you can literally go village level, or not village level, but county level, district level data and see that the trend is just very, very, very plain. I think it would be really silly to deny this. And things are getting worse. I was speaking to I was in Greece recently and I was speaking to a cleaning worker who was telling me about the price of feta, which was 4 to 7 kilos before the 2002 inflation hit. It's now 14, double. And she was telling me that she goes and hunts for special offers to supermarkets every week. You can't have the level of discontent and that level of precarity and that level of, honestly, indignity and not have some kind of political shift. So it's not surprising that there is. I should say about the inflation, though, that it's blamed on the war, and the war did see a supply crunch initially, but it was just initially. The supply crunch were ironed out almost very quickly after just a few months. 45% of the hikes, especially in the Baltics, of commodity price rises, of electricity price rises, are corporate profits. 45%. And there is no way you can constrain this without meaningful intervention, without increasing state capacity, and without working class organizing. Europe's businesses, Baltic especially, the businesses have been better shielded, better protected than people from the cost shock. And the businesses, I mean, not just better protected, they've just given a complete free rein to like hire and fire people. Like I used to work at, this is a very embarrassing confession, but I used to work at TransferWise, this big fintech company. Even there, you have just complete hiring and firing without any sense, and the government doesn't intervene. At all, actually. And what's even more interesting is that even the right-wing parties, they're completely evil, but like what's even more interesting is that even they are facing a wall with, it's unsurprising, but it tells us how monumental the challenge is. Meloni, whose party partly came up on these kinds of issues, right? Of course, linking it to deeply racist and xenophobic attitudes and anti-refugee sentiments, but linking it to working class poverty and precarity, said a couple of months back that her party does not have an anti-European wing anymore. She is emerged as one of the strongest contender for continuing American protection and for neoliberalism. That gives us a window of opportunity, because that tells us the limits of the right-wing organizing, that even though they might have been tapping into what is a genuine resentment and a genuine economic pain, they don't have a way out. They still sort of fall back to neoliberalism, to austerity, because the way out would mean meaningful redistribution, meaningful improvement to the lives of working class people, to the lives of poor, meaningful upgrading of the conditions that people are living in. In Estonian towns, you have people, 70, 80-year-olds, completely restricted mobility. I've met some people in the villages trapped in their houses because there's no elevator, there's no lift. Literally trapped to die, actually. Some of them don't even have families nearby. So there is a way to deal with this resentment, to dampen the racist sentiment, but it only comes through this, and no other way. Okay. I was, in the same vein, I was looking at this. This really shocked me, and I don't know if it would, I kind of stumbled upon this just last night, actually, that for all the talk about, I'm obviously no fan of the military. I'm firmly anti-war, and we can discuss this. You can challenge me on, one thing about living in London or in India is that the drums of war are obviously really, really far. But of course, there's been a lot of talk now about increased defense spending, about Europe having no military capacity, and it now having to impose austerity again and increase defense spending and so on. So I was just checking how much have countries in Europe spent over a decade on military. Yeah? So this is from 2011 to 2024. So before this, because now they want to spend 5% of the GDP. They spent $3 trillion in US dollars over military spending since 2011 to 2024. And if you take from 1991, this is from the Stockholm Peace Research Institute. If you take the data from 1991, from the dissolution of the Soviet Union to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the total non-US NATO spending is 8.9 trillion US dollars. Now that is an earth-shattering amount just wasted away on an institution that they themselves admit is declining and is unable to efficiently counter Russia. 8.3 trillion. You can't have this much amount of waste from just absent-mindedness or inefficiency. You can't just misallocate trillions of dollars. It has a logic. Most of this defense spending goes to homegrown firms who are in bed with the ruling elite. In Germany, for instance, a huge percentage of this goes into just buying German goods, German tanks, and so on, which even by their own logic are absolutely inefficient at doing what they want to do. So there is enough money going around. There is enough political capacity to deploy money. What they're unwilling to do is just an absolute, I don't know, it sounds almost conspiratorial, but I think an absolute hatred for the working class and the poor. They just do not want to change the logic of that power dynamic. There's no other way to understand this. Okay, I will now move to, sorry, go on. Yeah. This is before. Yeah, massively more. I mean, it's going to be different because these are so this spending is basically spread, it's not a single spending, right? It's split across 29 different forces, 29 different countries. So it's a very hodgepodge kind of funding, and then if you add it up, that's what you get. It's going to be very different, but it's, of course, going to be much bigger. Because we're moving from 3.5% to 5%, but spread across different countries differently. Okay, now I'm going to move to talking about how the left also replicates the same disdain for the working class poor, and the same, it produces this, it's sort of also very unwillingly and unwittingly, I would say, sometimes with the best of intentions, reproduces the neoliberal logic. And I want to lay this out, giving specifically the example of the climate movement, and I'm going to be provocative a little bit, that is deliberate, but please feel free to challenge me later. There was a T-shirt running around yesterday that said, "I love reality," and this part of the talk is going to be trying to bring the climate movement just back to the ground a little bit, and lay out what I think are neoliberal strains that kind of quote-unquote are guised as left. Firstly, the climate change movement rests on two myths, or two propositions. One, that we need an energy transition, that we will move from, just like we have moved from, just like we've moved from biomass burning to coal, to oil and gas, we will now move to renewable energy. Yeah? And the second proposition is that renewable energies are going to get cheaper and cheaper, and then eventually they will be not just the most cleaner, but also helpful for people because they're cheaper. They're going to help people save costs. This story has never happened. Never in the history of the globe has there been an energy transition. Individual sectors have seen transitions, like American transport, for instance, and I'm sorry to talk so much about the US data, but that's just the most easily available. So you see this kind of very neat phase-like transitions from biomass to coal to petrol in trains and in transport sector in general. But on a societal, on a global level, it's never happened. There has not been a sequence in which coal replaces organic energy, followed by oil, and then nuclear power, and then renewable. What has been is just gigantic accumulation and agglomeration of energy resources. Is coal on top of more and more and more and more and more. That's how the global story looks like. And even if you focus on just, like, say, one advanced society like the US, for instance, and this is per capita, this is not global, this is the story. You have, collectively, we use more and more and more and more, just a diverse array of energy, but even the use of traditional biomass has not declined in absolute terms. And again, I'm happy to like talk about this later. There are some very good new literature that discusses this in very granular detail. It's actually really fascinating. This is not to say that it's impossible, of course not. It's to say that the scale of the challenge is just Himalayan. It's way more bigger than what sometimes we on the left naively assume in our conventional vision of the energy transition. So what we need is not just cleaning up the energy, the electricity systems. This requires a gigantic industrial strategy. It requires dealing with really hard sectors like steel, cement, aviation, shipping, figuring out entire sectors from the ground up. And again, this is something that you can't do without having some sort of state capacity, some sort of industrial strategy, and so on and so forth. Now, the other thing that I think the left, the climate movement on the left, embarrassingly, I think, ignores is production. My stats are a little bit outdated, but I think it's only gotten worse, to be honest. This is from 2016. The industrial sector alone consumed more energy, 56%, than half an hour. Okay. Than the commercial and residence and transportation combined. So all of us living our consumer lifestyle in the residential sector are responsible for just 11%. The rest is industrial, it's production-based. By all of us, of course, we buy production goods and so on, but I'm talking about like our residential consumption. And even if you looked at consumption, industrial sector is the biggest consumer. 44% of the total global output. And even if within that you look at consumption, just not by sector, by people, the richest 1% account for 60% of the global, 66 even maybe now, in the last Oxfam report. 66%, even if you looked at individual consumption. And increasingly, the global elite are really global, I want to give this tragicomic example of the wedding that happened in India. My friends from India would know, of one of the richest people in India. There was an 800 guest party cruising on the Mediterranean, which costed 150 million. Katy Perry and Backstreet Boys came out of retirement to perform. It was so loud and raucous and so, I don't even know, it's like so dirty that like the villages around Genoa in Italy literally went out on protest. And this was a pre-wedding party. Then there was a pre-wedding party which flew Rihanna out of her break to for 6 million only, and access to Indian markets for cosmetic goods. 1,280 guests, including Bill Gates, of course, Ivanka Trump, Hillary Clinton, Zuckerberg, each having not just their private drone, but an entire military airbase was converted into a private jet, was converted into a parking lot for the drones. They all also got a private jet to use as a taxi to go around India. And this was the pre-wedding. Because there's also the wedding and the post-wedding, and then there's a post-wedding and the honeymoon. In total, it costed, it's really embarrassing actually, to like even be from India seeing this. And yeah. They took these guests to a forest, which is a private zoo, which has 33,000 animals, which were flown from all over the world. The Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species issued a red alert because never before so many species were traveled in 1 year, imported just for these rich people to like have a party. So what I was doing day before was using a little bit of ChatGPT, just counting the carbon emissions of this wedding. And I won't, like, I have very little time, but I was going to go step by step. But the carbon emissions of that entire wedding is the daily carbon emission of Latvia. Right? So that's the challenge. What we're facing is a monumental challenge that corporations and the rich, it's a class war. There's no way to understand climate change except in terms of class war. Now, what does the left do? The left has three strategies. One, overwhelm people with facts and data, working people more predominantly, to reduce carbon footprints. Carbon footprints, by the way, was a term that was invented by British Petroleum. And you can see why. Or to tax them, basically put austerity. The third is to literally say that we need austerity. Is to literally say that we need to consume less, we need to spend less, use less electricity. If you go to the towns in the Baltic countryside, where they are anyway degrowing for the last 20 years, just think about how that's going to sound. This is what it's going to sound like. This is a slogan from the Yellow Vests movement in France. They're like, forget about the end of the world, we're really worried about the end of the month. You can't really expect you can't really expect to fear, shame, whip, tax people into a climate politics. That doesn't happen, that's never happened. That's no movement has ever been able to do that. Now, there is a way to do climate politics, and I will just give one example. Decarbonization is a very complicated topic, and I don't want to kid that it's very simple, so on. But let's just take one little part of decarbonization, right? Our best bet to decarbonize an economy is electrification, right? That's one thing we know how to more or less do. Like, there are some issues with grid stability and so on, but we have an idea that also electricity is one of the biggest sources of coal-dominated pollution. Electricity can be generated without CO2 emissions and so on and so forth. So what that means is, it means a gigantic rewiring of everything, right? Our transport, our buildings, our hospitals, our schools. It means dramatic increase in application of electricity to not only transport, but industrial, domestic, commercial applications where we currently burn fossil fuels. So it's a very big transition. Now just think about it. What kind of workers do we need for this transition? We need electricians, we need construction workers, exactly. We need pipe fitters, we need plumbers, we need painters. We need exactly the kind of people that we have learned to demonize and just like tax. So what a green strategy needs is exactly creating jobs for the people that are left out. You can't do it. I'm very sorry to say this, but like, you and I won't do this. We will be the ideological anchor. We will sort of be a clarifying force in conceptualizing and in organizing it, but we will not electrify. It will be these workers. It's these workers from the left out towns, the carpenters, in fact, like if you look at, let's say, I mean, we can debate about this, like, but let's say nuclear reactors, or even like, let's talk heat pumps, setting up heat pumps and so on. You need literally the skills that oil and gas workers have. Skills of drilling, skills of hydraulic fracturing, these kinds of trade skills. The very people who are hit the most severely by not just austerity, but honestly sometimes also by left politics. Because the climate movement, like I said, also very sadly and very heartbreakingly proposes austerity from the back door. In London, for instance, there was the mayor of London instituted what's called the ULEZ zone, which is the ultra-low emissions zone. It's basically a tax on high-polluting vehicles if they need to enter London, big vehicles. Who uses big vehicles? It's van drivers, it's construction workers, it's truck drivers, and so on. So it's hit the working class. They just hate this policy. And the same thing with what happened in the German Green Party. Like, it's not a surprise that it flopped, because they forced households to install expensive heat pumps, and it led to a drop in the popularity, and it gained traction for the AfD. I mean, how is that a surprise? We sometimes on the left come up with all sorts of like cultural theory and Gramscian hegemonic explanation, but like, you just have to talk to them. It's why should they pay more austerity taxes? Because they've been doing that for the last 20 years. Now, I don't have that much time, so I'm going to shift gear to India about the farmers' movement, which happened in 2020. Thank you. Of which many of my friends were part of, and I did a little bit of journalistic work with some of my comrades back there. It was what I'm going to do is just lay out very quickly what the crisis was, what its demands were, and then maybe what we can learn from some of these tactics, especially with the tactic about linking climate-related demands, ecological demands, to people's immediate interests and concerns. Maybe most, I mean, I'm sure you've heard of the movement. It happened in 2020. It was the single biggest mobilization, I think, to be honest, seen in modern times. Close to 1 million people showed up at the capital, where basically blocked all the major highways to Delhi, and didn't leave for 1 year. Through the harshest winter that Delhi saw in 20 years, and the harshest summer, 70 people died out of just cold. The Indian government attacked these farmers with Israeli-made drones. They had barbed wires fencing the capital of Delhi from its very own people. And they won, because they just never left. It's just staggering. Now, the roots of this, and this is some of the journalistic work that I used to do with this group called People's Archive of Rural India, and I highly recommend you check that out. They just do really beautiful work, like micro-level work around these things. The background to the farmers' resistance was that Indian farmers are usually protected when it comes to certain crops. They have subsidies. So they have a guarantee that the government will buy their produce. So it's a way to hedge against the market. Because unlike these crops, these are food crops, rice and wheat and a few other food crops. Other crops that Indian farmers grow are linked to the market, right? So this, for instance, is cotton seeds, and you can see the cotton seed flowering into a bundle of cash, because there was a boom in cotton production in the world, I mean, demand for cotton. Many Indian farmers moved to growing cotton. Now, cotton, unfortunately, takes a lot of water. It also takes 63% more fertilizers and insecticides than the local crops that they are used to grow. And because it's linked to the market, of course, it fluctuates, the prices. So once you can have a bumper crop and sell, but in another time, let's say, the US offers cotton subsidies to its farmers, you're gone. And that's what happened. It led to just people not knowing what the fuck to do with their cotton. They shifted to it because they really, wanted to improve their living standards, wanted to get. This was one person telling me that, I'm telling my friend, that I will make this money, send my son to an English-speaking school, and that's why I thought I should grow cotton. Genuine working-class demands and aspirations. Sorry, that's completely from another. What that led is the biggest wave of suicides in a particular sector in Indian history. According to the government's own data, in that decade when the cotton production rose, it's staggering to even believe it, to be honest. 30 people kill themselves every day because they're just completely in debt and they're finished, basically. Yeah? And there is a climate story to this, because what they usually grow is local variants, right? This is from an indigenous tribe in Orissa of India. What they're used to growing is, this is this farmer showing a plate full of local seeds. It's just staggering biodiversity. There are some seeds that are specifically for when the rain is too little. There's some seeds specifically for when it rains too much. Some seeds for like growing on the slope. Some seeds for growing on the slope for a plain. Some seeds where there's too much flooding and you just eat them as snacks, right? Exactly the kind of biodiversity that you need to combat climate change, right? This is what you need, right? You need weather-resistant crops, you need less fertilizer, then you have less carbon. So exactly. And what it does, the same story. You have marketization, completely finishes it off. You have like few local variants left, but it's mostly dead. Now, when the farmers came out in protests, they were resisting corporatization, right? And therefore, by extension, they were resisting, it was a fight for climate change, right? But individual farmers, we must remember, came out fighting for their livelihoods. They came out fighting for their aspirations and for their dignity. It was linked to climate change. It was what the climate movement leadership did, and that's where its beauty and its effectiveness comes, is to link these concerns with concerns of climate change. And I remember even then, from the right in India, one of the criticisms against the farmers' movement was that this is climate unfriendly, because they're demanding subsidies for crops that take up too much water. And they were demanding, by the way, subsidies for rice and wheat, and that does take up too much water. That does lead to carbon emissions. But the response from the climate leadership, from the farmer movement leadership was true, but if you want us to grow climate-friendly crops, then subsidize it. Give us better jobs then. Guarantee that if we grow these seeds, give us a legal, constitutionally guaranteed right that we will have a dignified life. So it was linked to, their response was not to say that you have to sacrifice for climate or in your fight against imperialism, but the response was to enmesh local demands into broader climate demands. And I think that the left can really do that. How much time do we have? 10 minutes. Okay. Yeah, maybe I will close soon. Well, I think that the left can do that. And I don't think that who doesn't want better insulated houses here in Europe? Who doesn't want better transportation in the countryside, in the urban, even in the cities? Better schools, better hospital infrastructure, better electrification of the appliances. Like, who doesn't want clean air? Like, these are public universal goods that everyone deserves. We really don't have to impose austerity on working people. We have to impose it on corporate profits. We really don't have to ask them to make sacrifices. And we don't really have to like throw facts and scare or wait for them to get enlightened. No, it's actually the other way around. We have to like really start listening, learning, understanding the intricacies of the local demands and local needs. I really think that we can have a strategy where we could both save the planet and make life significantly better for the planet. The fact that this doesn't cross our minds shows how removed the left has become from the poor. It's insane. One of the things that I found insane in the European left when I moved is, where are the poor? Where are the working people? This was the bread and butter, right? In India, when you organize, right, like when I was organizing domestic workers, for instance, you meet people with all kinds of bizarre beliefs. You meet people who are extremely homophobic or casteist and so on. But the only way that you transcend that is by working around the common program, around the universal dignity of human life and public goods. Like Margaret Thatcher said, there is no alternative. Thank you.
Shall we begin? Wow, thank you. So we do still have some more time left, and that is about the right time to start speaking together, because the collective knowledge in this room, I'm scared of it. So let's get some of the thought going. Any questions, thoughts, feelings out there? Let me see the hands so I understand how are we doing time-wise. 1, 2, 3, perfect. Any more? 4, beautiful. Okay, 5, amazing. So I do say we take one question at a time for starters. Let me look in your eyes again. I'm looking at the perfect. Okay, let's start from here. Hey.
Yes, great. You're talking about the discontent from the working class, and I was thinking, like in the Baltics specifically, and I mean, you lived in Estonia, so maybe you felt this as well, but I also think it's something that we're struggling currently with in Latvia, is that communism is illegal, and anything that is interpreted to be that is under a lot of pressure and surveillance and stuff. So I think anything that even is linked to leftism is bad, is seen as bad. So like, maybe you have any ideas of like how to overcome this, or like how to raise people's awareness of leftist ideas around, yeah.
I mean, I mean, if communism is a bad idea, then let's just not call it that, right? I'm not very like attached to, or I don't think we should be attached to labels. I think what matters is like just like building campaigns where it hurts the most. Electricity prices, for instance, they're like insane. It's just enormously painful. Like people are literally like not heating their houses. Now, most of these electricity grids already have state intervention, but they're intervention in favor of the corporations. You have, like I said, 45% of the price hikes are made of profits, literally. And the grid ownership, the distribution ownership is private, and so on. That's such a beautiful opportunity to intervene both at building a campaign that people will genuinely resonate to, and at least begin to have a demand for renewable energy. Because its dependence on oil and gas, it dependence on non-renewable sources of corporate supplied energy that also leads to these fluctuations and these massive rises. So, yeah, I mean, if people don't want to hear communism, like, why call it that? I think.
Fair. We have some, I think, a lot of Lithuanian experience as well that could be telling you more about the labeling and not labeling certain things. Let's continue with Vasa here. Here you go.
I have a comment and then a question. The comment is about the link between militarization wars and the poor. So actually I wanted to comment yesterday as well around the the use of poor, racialized and discriminated people as the deadly units, like to basically using the dependence on the subsidies or payments from the government. So what Russia does, except for using the migrant force, also it uses the most poor regions, and let's say Burat and Tuva people are being also blamed of being the most violent people on the front, and then basically what happens is that people live beyond the beyond being poor, and then they it's a suicide, basically. They sell their lives for the payment for their families. So they know that they will die, and they go and then they kill other people, and then their families get the payment. So basically, it's also the result of the neoliberal politics in Russia for a while. So it's on the both sides. And then in the defense, the investments go to the militaries for more weapons and stuff. So yeah, that's a comment, how it's linked on the other side. And then the question comes from my Lithuanian experience. So I live in Nida, in Neringa, in the very posh Lithuanian resort, which is Nida local population is shrinking. People are moving out. The school is about to shut down. It would shut down if not Ukrainians coming here and actually saving the school. Also, the plumbers and electricians, I don't know, half of them working in Nida are Ukrainians, and the locals tend to be absent. So it's it's a mess. And then when and also there are a lot of real estate built for hotels, and it's a ghost town in the winter. So when I talk to local people who are absolutely, beyond sadness and resentment about what is happening, nobody's happy, and then okay, so why don't you protest? Well, let's tell the mayor that he's a bullshit. Everybody knows that he's a bullshit. And then what I discovered, everybody is somehow in have risks. So everybody gets profit a bit, or if somebody stands up and speaks up, then they will lose some of the vital income because they do something illegally with the agreement from the local, everybody who lives there earns from tourists, right? So to be able to get the restaurant license, you have to have some connections, you have to have some social support from the also, there are some monopolies and whatnot. So when the tree is being cut, nobody says, what the fuck, publicly. Everybody says to themselves, and the tree is being cut to build another hotel complex, which is super ugly and horrible and super posh, And also, it's built on top of the, about the communist resentment and all these things. There was rybhos, the fishing... kolkhoz maybe, but then the fish hose. That was the building in the lagoon, and then fishermen used to use it as storage and whatnot, but it's in the center. Oh no fishing in the center, too smelly. It was closed after, since independence, I guess, and then now it's being transformed into the resort. Sorry, I'm not short. So, yeah, anyway, what is the local bar under the two chestnut trees is torn down, everybody is outraged, like nobody speaks up. Everyone is like, and then rumor by rumor by rumor by rumor, I realized that, yeah, if this person speaks up, they will lose the profit in their semi-legal shed that they are renting out. If this person speaks up, their restaurant will be closed. If this person, etc., etc., etc. And all these businesses provide work for even lower class. So if the lower class speaks up, you know, and also many businesses are in minus. So like they're barely surviving. Although it's like super posh and rich people coming, a lot of money. And why it's in minus? Because of electricity costs and water costs. It's like it's such an entangled mess. I am totally lost how to speak to people. Like really. I'm dealing mostly with Ukrainians, but also with like Lithuanians, locals. Yeah, so that's it. My question is like, what is your perspective on this economical shithole?
It would be so narcissistic of me to give perspective on something that you know so intimately, and you've done such a brilliant class analysis of why people don't organize. No, but like I think what you described is literally the dirty secret of neoliberalism, right? It makes saving the planet, I mean, the thing that is, it's either saving the planet and or not having money at the end of the month. And that's the dirty secret. And when you have that calculation, of course people are not going to choose to save the planet. That's just how it is, like everywhere. Like we have the time and resources to do it, but like working people don't. In Lithuania, I was saying, I mean, the working people, I think working class people are not even voting anymore. They're completely alienated. It's like 44 or 46%. It's beyond even, it's a resignation. It's not even resentment. But I don't know, like what you've done is actually a very good class analysis, right, of the different interests. But here's the thing, the only way that people genuinely move to action, mass, is if they see at least a short-term win. A short-term win in their material conditions. Usually, doomsaying, planetary, moralizing, guilt-inducing doesn't work. So, I don't know, it seems like from what you said, right, that like a campaign around reducing electricity costs, a campaign around giving jobs for electrification, because that's something that towns really desperately need, and the planet needs, with state backing and state guaranteeing. That's the campaign that would bring people out. I don't know, you would know better. You know, it's something that comes out of just really like micropolitics of what they want. And really, like, I mean, there was so much I wanted to say, for instance, like, one reason why I was talking about production is because workers literally have the power to shut down production. If there's been few successful cases of shutting down oil production, it was workers. But they almost always do it out of campaigns that are very around their interests. There are few mavericks like you and me who would just sacrifice their lives and come out and like we're like. But the mass of the people. So there's the activist class, which is usually ideological, and that kind of does the coordination role and links these local immediate concerns to broader things. But the bulk of the people, they come out for better pay, better dignity, for better Medicare and so on. So it's how do you make their lives less precarious, more dignified, you know, through those micropolitics. It's a very difficult job. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the realistic approach is much needed here. Speaking that everyone must become an activist is kind of a, yeah, blown off proportion. Anyway, how are the hands there? Any more? Perfect. 4. I feel like there is more, but you are not raising them, are you? Okay. Well, you know what? Let's start there. Cool. And while we, you know what? No. Here we go. Up. Thank you. Here we go.
Okay, so I have not so much a question as a piece of critique. You keep talking about the left, and in terms of like climate activism, for instance, but I feel like when you talk about like the left talking about individual action instead of production and the rich, you're talking more about liberals and not leftists. I've never met a socialist climate activist who says individual action is the thing we should focus on. It's always talking about dismantling capitalism, systemic change, and it's the same thing with hating the working class. I don't know many socialists that hate the working class. Like, I get that you see this from like center-left political parties, but they're liberals, they're not socialists. And this is like mostly socialists here, I'm imagining. Like a good example is Greta Thunberg, for instance. When she was 16, she was paraded around like neoliberal stuff like the World Economic Forum and talked about individual action, oh, you gotta recycle, oh, you gotta drive your car less. But then as she grew up, she now identifies as a socialist and she goes it does political activism to dismantle capitalism, to fight against the rich, to do systemic change. So who is this left you're talking about? Because I don't know them.
No, fair. I mean, I am talking from a socialist left position. I think it's like, yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe it is like a critique of center left. But I do think like sometimes ideas that seem radical are just liberal. So we talk about dismantling capitalism, we talk about sort of restraining corporations, but then the route that makes it left is through organizing around interests of the poor and the masses, right? Through universal programs, through public good. And I think it's a good thing that if that's what you think the left is doing. That's good news.
Are any more hands here? I remember someone was right. Okay, here you go.
Thanks for the talk. Very insightful, very interesting. You talked a bit about electrification. And, in regards to electrification, particularly about transport, but about other things as well, in my opinion, it creates like further problems. The things that you described, that like we need to change the infrastructure and everything, like the whole question about batteries in South America and lithium and all that. I mean, it seems like, of course, like the situation we are now in is disastrous. But then, like electrifying it seems also not maybe a solution. And for me, I don't know so much about it, but from things I hear, degrowth ideas seems the way forward and the direction forward. So like not to create further problems and so on. So that's my take on it, but I would be very interested to hear like, what do you think about it? And well, this whole thing about electrification, which obviously creates further problems down the line.
Here's how I'm thinking about it. Now, degrowth, I don't know. So to be honest, like, when I read degrowth literature, I tend to agree with it. I think my issue with it is that as a campaigning slogan, it's disastrous. Because you can't have austerity and then people to degrow. But when you read the literature, what it actually says is some sectors need to grow, some sectors need to grow less. We need less wasteful consumption, we need better. Like nobody would deny, even in the degrowth literature, they wouldn't deny that we need better housing for most people. We need better transport, right? We need better social care. I mean, you can't really have... What do we do with these people in the towns and villages, for instance? Like, do we just leave them? Like, leave this infrastructure like that? We have to do something, right? I think the degrowth literature does offer solutions that, okay, this is how we do it. We do it with these environment and social goals in mind. And that's literally what I'm saying, actually. And I think that it's unavoidable that you have some kind of electrification and so on. And to be very honest, the demand and the need and the inevitability of electrification on a scale never seen before is actually going to come from the global south. It's already completely going to dwarf, I look at this chart, which is just each time I look at it, it's just insanely mind-boggling. That's coal production of all the countries in the West since the Industrial Revolution, and that's China. And there is this notion in the left that the China is just producing for the West, and the Asia is just producing the West. I think that's actually a very narcissistic notion, because yes, it is, but it's only because it's suppressing demand of its local poor, where there is a gigantic need for electricity, for better infrastructure. I remember, because I grew up in a very low-income neighborhood, and I remember once I was admitted to the hospital, and it was a government hospital, and in the ICU, there was a power cut. When it comes back, 2 people have died. They're dead, because the oxygen ran out. And I mean, of course, this was like 20 more years ago. But much of rural India, for instance, is still severely underinvested in terms of public goods. So it'll happen anyway. The thing is, how do we do it? And how can we as left shape it towards general good? And once again, when I'm saying like consumption, like I said, like bulk of consumption is industrial, is production, it's transport for all its emissions is actually not even that much. I don't know if that answered your question.
Thank you for the talk. I was just, it's a small comment about the rural situation in Baltic countries, especially with the one thing to keep in mind is not just economical, I think it's also demographic, because by the time independence happened till nowadays, you have some countries lost 25% of the population, mostly in rural areas where it could reach up to 40%. The average age is like plus 12 years from the national average in some areas. It cannot in some areas be sustainable. And it always kind of a good reminder is that Lithuania, percentage-wise, how much it lost from population since independence till nowadays is the same as Syria during its civil war. 25% approximately, which is, put it into scale, you know, how crazy it is that depopulation here happened from almost 4 million to 2.8, 2.7. So in some areas, it's really unsustainable, even if the money is there. I mean, of course, if you give 2,000 euro as a salary, people will show up for sure. But that is not, you are not sustaining them. They would move on after the salary is gone or it's not competitive or something like that. So just a small comment, it's not just neoliberal policies, which is, that's a part of it for sure, but also the population, it's just a free nosedive, basically, statistic-wise. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I mean, this number is staggering. And I remember reading about the Estonian rural migration, and it seemed also that predominantly it was young people leaving. But it happened after the liberalization, right? So in that sense, it is market-driven, because they went for jobs. And, yeah. But I get it. It's much more complex and severe, the problem of depopulation.
Thank you. So we have one more hand there. We'll be getting there in a second, but first we go here. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for your speech. About this working class kind of war, I have been reading recently. I'm from Finland, and I have been, so greetings. I have been reading about this book called Huippurikkaat, which is like the ultra-rich people of Finland, and about their like lingers in the politics. And there is this like party called Kokoomus, which is like a national Finnish party, and it's based on monarchs. So the roots of this party is in Finnish, like rich people, like monarchs, and like people of old money. And what this book reveals about the rich people is that the wealthy people distinguish themselves from other people because of their wealth. So they build narratives of their wealth that it's their own success. So when their own wealth is their own success, according to do that, it means that the people who are working class and people who are in less, who are financially not in such a position. So it means by their logic that their position is also their own fault, because they're, yeah. So I'm coming from this point because I think that we should watch the wealth gap and the war of working class rights also from the perspective where, from this narrative perspective. And I think that because the politics and the wealth is lingered together, okay, let's go this way. Because money is power, and the problem also is that the power changes people's brains. Power kind of builds people. That's why we rotate the leaders in democracy. But we don't rotate the rich people. They are living their wealth like all their life. So it means that the ideas that power kind of like builds get rooted in them. And so that's why I honestly think that the current political situation is basically, it cannot be solved in any other way than taxing the rich into the level where they don't get this hyper power focus. I think that's the only way. And I think that the ultra rich people understand that the climate change and everything, and I think that probably that's why they are hyping up their own power and their own wealth, because they want to secure their place in the world where the climate changes everything. Because the 1% of global ultra-rich people own over 50% of the wealth in the world. Yeah, so yeah, this is only my take to this and what I have been thinking. And I think that also we need to think that social media is also an outlet for this anger that people have of this wealth inequality. And the algorithms are also designed to kind of push those feelings that could be the change of the wealth inequality towards the people that are seen as a scapegoat. I think that this is my take to this, what I think that is underneath all this, and I think that we should be concentrating on making the ultra-rich people to kind of shoot them down into our level so that they don't distinguish themselves of us anymore, and take care that their wealth doesn't grow anymore, but they get into level of other people so that they see us also as a people.
I agree.
Okay, and was there one more here? Okay, look at that. Oh, but there is a new hand. Look at that, crazy. Get it.
Thank you so much for the lecture. It was very interesting. I just wanted to say that I feel like when we talk about Baltics, maybe we don't get the full picture, because I think that comparing it to other countries, like the migration of other countries or them entering the EU is very different story. Because people, yes, they went out because of the jobs, because of the opportunities, which were not there, but this is a very particular case coming out of Soviet Union, where the poverty was just like the daily norm. So we were going for opportunities, but we were quite happy to go for them, and we had like all laid out for us because Spain fought for it very, very hardly, that we would have this liberty of freedom of movement, and when we study that we would be recognized fully, etc., and we would get all the benefits, which was which is not the case of all the others. And I think we claim that we were occupied, so we don't really understand what was, colonization, and we don't feel neither empathy for our own history or empathy for others, because it's a very limited story. Like when you go deeper in the West, it's like for them the conditions are getting a little bit worse now. But for us, it's a very, very different type of story. So it's difficult to compare, I think. So it's a nuance, which is, I think, quite important. Yeah.
Do you think it's getting better then, relatively?
It's complicated, because we do feel a little bit of this spillover effect that some people are getting back, and and when we talk about NIDA, sorry, when we talk about NIDA and those regions, yes, there is some gentrification, but it's a different story. There is this issue, but it's not comparable to global scale what people are confronted with, and I think it's a bit like we need to integrate not only economy, but then to integrate the social issues which came with it, because unionizing here or going into social parties, exactly the word communism is very problematic here, and for the reason. It's you cannot be blind for that. Yeah.
You're saying two things. You're making two claims, right? So you're saying that the migration that happened, the big migration that happened, was not forced, it was a choice, right? And secondly, that the economic pain is not as severe as it seems.
No, I think it's severe, but it's when you compare with it, the opportunities which were there, it's not comparable with countries which are out of the EU, how they are trying now to grasp for, this is not the same type of immigration, because there was we didn't got the same amount of aid Marshall Plan than, United States helped EU to establish itself. But we did got this kind of freedom, all those fundamental four freedoms of, what EU gives you. And and from our also generational experience as well, it was that's great, you get something. So it's a very different perspective, and we were able to adapt, and it's just not comparison, for instance, and that's why we cannot get what Greece's experience or Spain, etc., and we don't, we are not just, so I think it's just a bigger picture which needs to be considered through talking about this, because there is regional particularities which are quite spectacular. I think it's always we discussed this, but there was a huge problem there 30 years ago, so it needs to be incorporated.
100%, but both of these claims are empirical claims, right? They're claims about what people believe to be true. And there's a lot of anthropological literature actually about young people moving out of Estonia. I don't know about Latvia and Lithuania. There's a lot of my friend who works at the University of South, Ayat Anist, she's interviewed hundreds and hundreds of young people who moved in the 90s. And you're right, some people did move out of choice, but not all. They also felt pressure and economic stagnation.
Definitely, there was not a choice. I don't say that there was a choice. I just say that there are opportunities which were there. It's very, very different from what Syrian diaspora experience or anyone else. So it's massively different, and I think it's very important to kind of be conscious of that, and then to compare from those two sides. Because now, the argument I see to all my racist colleagues or whatever, I'm what's the difference from the immigrants who come here from your cousin who went to London in 2004, where it was just possible? So it's very, very important nuance for us to think, because there is a huge barrier here, I think, on that side.
Yeah, for sure. And also you're right about part of the racism in Brexit against Eastern European migrants is just really vile and severe. Yeah.
Perfect. Could we have a show of hands? I have some thinking to do because we're only 5 minutes left. We have one more. Vivek? Perfect. Amazing. One last question, one last answer, and we're wrapping up. Thank you.
No, I think I'll use it as a segue to talk a bit about the degrowth workshop, which we have next. But it's more like just, again, observations from someone who is not from Baltic, new to Baltic. And one of the initial question from one of the comrades, which is like, because communism is the scare term, right? Like, how do we mobilize people? And this has been my reflection, and I think it's really potent one within Baltic culture. I grew up in a place where I barely saw any green, ever. There was one tree, and the only memory I had because I fell from that tree, literally. And then it was chopped down and like, in the idea of growth. So for me, I think when we talk about growth and degrowth, it also has a lot to do with cultural reproduction of that myth. Like, what do we mean by growth? And like this abstract idea of, you know, everyone is well off. That's the idea. I think degrowth offers that from a much more localized perspective. It is about redefining what do we mean by progress, what do we mean by development. So that is why everything I think which you shared, Tarun, is very much in sync with what a degrowth future might look like. And of course, it should be built upon on first elevating the poor out of poverty, dignity for all, and that should be a period thing. Like, there should not be any argument or debate about it. About the second point, which, I don't know, a note of reflection, and I think it could be a great thing for us to mobilize, is getting back to the indigenous traditions of Baltic culture. Like in Estonia, like foraging, I never have ever done foraging ever in my life. And experiencing that, because in the end, just like gaining capital is not going to make us happy either. Like the community, the like being alive, being one with yourself. I don't want to sound spiritual guru or something, but I think these traditions and these rituals have so much potency, and I think also something which connects all of us really closely within the Baltic again. A political movement around preserving those rituals, something which is so much in harmony with your surrounding and with your nature, and like mainly dignity for all. I think that is so much at heart. And sadly, when I did my surface level searching, it's the right who latched onto it first, like the ethnofuturism and all that stuff. So we got to reclaim that for sure and make it, like I'm myself a very hopeless person, but like let's try to hold on to hope, like wherever we can. So let's try that. Let's try that. Yeah, that's it.
No, thank you so much. I mean, I think what he said was just complements what I said and maybe even enriches it, because I think you're right that you need also this like value-based and localized appeals in organizing. And yeah, it's beautiful what he said. I can't really add anything.
Let's give some applause to the Tarun.